So today I'm going to talk about founders, co-founders, that relationship. It's going to be a challenging one. And I'm going to go through some lessons learned and the sort of questions that you should be asking. And then I have a worksheet that I'm going to share with you. Some very practical, very real scenarios that you will experience as a startup founder, co-founder, and a scoring methodology to help you navigate the inevitable shitstorm of that relationship. Okay, so that's the thesis of my talk. A bit about me, just real quick. I've done a few startups, and I've had co-founders for the first two. The one that I'm on right now, I started on my own and then later on brought on a co-founder. I've mentored a handful, more than a handful, and I've been involved in the startup community for some time. Been in Boise for 4.5 years, very grateful to be here and to share a few things that I know. And there's going to be open Q&A, and feel free during the session, ask me a question, whatever. This is highly informal, okay? And because I'm too cheap, I'm just using stock photography of pictures that I've taken so that you kind of get to know me a little bit too. So as a founder, you are picturing a world that others just don't see. You are envisioning the world made better because of something that you want to build. And that is a very interesting space to be in. Because in your head, what you're seeing is not duct tape and boxes and whatnot. You're seeing a superhero costume, right? You're envisioning this world made better, this problem that you are obsessed with being solved by a solution that you have in mind. And it's a little bit strange to have that energy to just think about something when you're showering, when you're driving, it's going to happen, right? You're feeling that. And it's very real to you. This is going to be extremely helpful because, in my experience, the founder has one primary job. One. You are the chief storyteller. Everything that you do is about telling the story. The first person you're telling the story to is yourself. And over time, that story is modified as you're learning more. You're working on a concept. Maybe you have a prototype, a wireframe. You put it out there, you show it to someone. Crickets. Nothing happens. They're not using it properly. You're not getting signups, whatever. Something goes wrong. You go back and you modify the story. You tell the story so you can hear the changes in the evolution. You're also telling this story to potential employees, to investors, customers, everyone else. In my world, your co-founder is one of the first people that will listen to this story very differently. Have you ever tried to describe what you do to your grandfather? And they're like, I don't know, she does something with computers, I don't understand it, right? Something like that, right? Your co-founder will hear you, will hear how you envision the world made better by your product, your solution, whatever it is that you're working on. And they will be able to see with a great deal of clarity what you're seeing. And you'll feel it right away. You will feel it right away. This is not an intellectual exercise. This is something very different. They will connect and respond and have the same level of curiosity. And that's when you know you're probably talking to someone that could be your co-founder. So now that you have found someone who's listening to your story and responding a little bit differently, here are the things that I'd like you to start considering very soberly. Is this your first startup? The data shows that if you have co-founders, your likelihood of success is higher. Now, if you've done 15 of them, then probably you don't need that. If it is, VCs certainly, maybe not so much at the seed or angel round, but VCs certainly, they look for that. Beyond VCs, there's a number of other reasons why you should have co-founders, and we'll talk about that in a second. How do you think about risk? What are the skills that you believe are going to be required to get the job done? Do you need a machine learning expert? Do you need an autonomous driving expert? Do you need someone who knows robotics? Do you have all those skills yourself? And what are you trying to optimize for? Do you have the capital necessary for 12 months, 24 months, 36 months, right? Whatever it may take. Start to think about that. If you do have someone in mind, and now you're talking to them, okay? You're starting to have those conversations. Something to consider. Did the idea come first or the desire to work together? Some very notable startups did not come from one person already having an idea. It's just two people that really want to work together. That's completely okay, but acknowledge that. If you have the idea and you approach someone else and you agree to work on that idea, you should also acknowledge that. This will change the dynamics of the roles that you play and the expectations that you're going to have of one another moving forward. So just acknowledge that up front. You may start with one idea and then pivot to something else. That's okay too. Do you have different skill sets, or are you both engineers, both designers, both business development people? Have you worked together before or not? Do either one of you have experience doing this? All of this is going to be important as you get into the formation of the business and you start to think about equity. You don't have to split the equity evenly. It doesn't have to be the case. Sometimes one person needs to work with you as a side hustle because they have a mortgage and kids in school and other things, and maybe the other person doesn't have those constraints, right? So one person maybe needs a salary, the other person doesn't. So all of that can factor into how you think about equity. Here's where things get challenging. How are you going to keep one another accountable? Everyone starts off in a honeymoon. There's a pink cloud phase when you agree to work on something together. You've told the story, they've responded favorably. You've maybe told a few other people, hey, we're starting something. We have a startup. You go to Trailhead, you give them your money, as all good startups here should, and you've got a desk, and now you're working. The pink cloud phase will end. And now there's a question of accountability. Someone's not putting in the hours that they said they would, or delivering what they said they would deliver. What is your ritual for accountability? For example, do you handle this through a regular sprint cycle? You plan for, let's say, a 2-week increment. You're going to go talk to potential customers. I'm going to work on the wireframe, as an example. We're going to come back, and you'll have had 10 meetings and the notes from those 10 meetings, and I will show you 6 completed screens. We come back together in 2 weeks. We show our deliverables at the scheduled time that we were supposed to meet. What happens if one of us misses? What happens if one of us continues to miss? Do we 86 them? Do we have a tough conversation? What do we do? The data shows that kicking the can down the road makes the divorce more expensive. Okay, it's not going to help. Knowing how to have these very direct, data-driven, accountable conversations early. What is the culture that you're creating? Before you even hire someone, you're doing it with your co-founder and with yourself. So some ideas that I have for you before I get into the worksheet. Maybe work on an MVP together. Before you start signing documents, before you get into dealing with lawyers, and potentially investors, work on something together, an MVP. Try a weekend hackathon. See what it's like to spend 16 hours, 7 Red Bulls and a pack of cigarettes deep into building something. What is that like? You learn a lot about people when you work with them. Interviews are not a great way of assessing what a co-founder relationship will be like. You'll get a lot of false positives, maybe even some false negatives. After you've done something together, just commit to a small project or an MVP or a hackathon. Do a postmortem. Give each other that feedback. Ask for the feedback. This is basically you simulating what life will be like with this person, at least during the first couple of years of your startup. Now, founder disagreements and divorce are very common. They can be brutal. So I'm going to propose something a little bit different. Do a pre-mortem. In this presentation, I'm going to give you my contact information so you can get it. There's a link to the actual Google Doc. I took a screenshot of the first section of it to give you an idea of what this is and how to use this tool. There are these scenarios that are extremely common for all new startups. What happens when we want to split equity? We want to raise money. We disagree on product. We want to hire a friend. One of us is done. All these things will happen, okay? Rather than wait for this to create the confusion, the chaos, and the heavy disagreement, before you form the entity, I would ask that you put down your answers and have your co-founder put their answer. So for example, we want to split the equity. One person says, split it based on who is doing what, and the other one says, no, we got to split it evenly. There's a disagreement here, okay? The next step, score this disagreement. How big is that delta? I'm proposing a 0 to 7 type of scoring scale. So for example, here I put a 4. You jointly need to come up with that number. That's not something you can do separately. You work together to figure out what that is. And then how do we resolve it? In this case, let's meet with 3 other founders and ask them. Okay, that's one solution. You keep going through this process. If by the end of this process, most of your scores are 4, 5, and 6, this is probably not a good co-founder for you. And you're able to assess this before cementing and papering this new company and going off and writing your first line of code. I'm saying line of code. Your startup may not be a technology startup. It doesn't matter. The first real investments that you're going to make in terms of building something. The other use case for this framework is to see how your co-founder reacts under duress. What is the instrument that they will propose for resolution? Let's ask our lawyer. Let's go to the board. There could be other solutions. Are the solutions that are coming to mind for them, do they lead with legality? Do they lead with humanity? Do they lead with context? You may have had something happen in your life that is going to cause you to not be able to work for 6 months. What is the remedy for that? Someone will say, well, if you can't work for 6 months, then you're done. Your options will still vest, but we have a 1-year cliff, so you didn't get anything. That's one approach. It's an extreme approach. There could be something else. Okay? My guidance to you as you're thinking about all of this is that when done properly, the journey will be much better with a co-founder, because it is one of the loneliest experiences you can ever have. It's irrational. What you are doing is very irrational, and the odds are stacked against you. And the data suggests that what I'm saying is true. So to do that, you're going to need, I think of, what was that movie? Do you all remember? The two women were riding their car and they went off the cliff. Thelma and Louise, exactly. You're looking for your Thelma or your Louise, if it may, right? You're looking for that person who is your ride or die. This is not an employee relationship. This is someone who also is going to work to some extreme levels to make that idea, that story that you both were imagining, come to fruition. If you find a co-founder, prepare yourself for the very real and very difficult situations that you will be facing. The first leg of the startup cycle is all about existential crises. You don't have money, no one cares about what you're building, you don't have the right skills, it's all resource constraints. Then, the next set of challenges show up when you do raise money. Now you have some external accountability. Now we're paying some real bills. We have employees. Then there's another set of challenges when you start to scale and then have success. People behave very differently when their equity is worth something. That will happen, hopefully, for you. Prepare for it. Some of the questions that you don't see here, but you'll see in the full document. What happens when one of you wants to sell the company and the other one doesn't? What happens when you want to hire your boyfriend and the other one says, well, I don't know. And how much should we compensate your boyfriend? Market compensation? Friends and family rate? What are we doing here? What happens when you get an unsolicited offer to acquire your company? These things hopefully will happen. This is a decision that will be hugely expensive to undo. I've had to undo mine twice.
Oh, no.
Yes. And so I'm sharing this with you, like if I ever get crazy enough to do another one of these, I will most certainly be following these directions. Included in that document, that the document that I just shared, at the very bottom of it, there's some other advice. I'd asked a couple of other founders that I know that have had a lot of experience to share what they learned and what they would do differently with you. I told them that I was speaking to some folks from Boise. And Thomas Knoll, a good friend of mine, he put down some things that I think are really worth exploring as well. That's the end of the actual talk, but I'm here to answer very specific questions, if you may have any, around finding a co-founder, firing a co-founder, equity, difficult conversations, the difference between a co-founder and a first employee, whatever it may be. I'm happy to spend the next 15 minutes taking your questions. Oh, thank you.
I guess my question is, I've had an established company for about 5 years. My co-founder haven't seen my husband, just because we built this company from randomness and it happened and it's grown. But he's not operational. So, poor guy, he's not here, he's on his way. We need operations because we can do the sales, the deal making, the product, but it's all that other stuff that is really, I think, hindering us from growing and getting to the next level. So what is your suggestion for that?
My co-founder right now is my wife. So I feel like I have a little bit of experience. In this particular company that I have now, my wife is my co-founder. So I have some level of awareness of the challenges that creates.
For her and my husband.
Yeah, exactly. So this is where a board is invaluable. Like there are a handful of lessons that I give every startup founder. The first one is hire the best HR person you can for the money months before you think you need them. That's the first bit of advice I would give everyone. I used to think of HR, I'm doing a little sidebar, I used to think of HR as just don't get sued. Just make sure that, things are like compliant. I was wrong. And I paid dearly for that. Not in terms of litigation or anything like that, but in terms of understanding how my need to react quickly to situations, that's what entrepreneurs do, goes against being thoughtful and equitable. I was doing a bunch of one-off compensation plans or hiring decisions and whatnot, and then you end up, we have 2,000 employees. You walk around one day and say, my God, I've created something that's not scalable. I've created something that isn't fair, or, it's not transparent, right? Yeah. So hire HR as early as possible, way before you think you need them. That's my first bit of advice. The second is form a board. The beauty of a board, and have at least one independent director on your board. The beauty of a board is that you're examining this as a separate entity. It's not you. You are now on the board with your husband and a third party, an independent director. And the three of you are looking at the business. You're not looking at it as an employee of the company. So you're able to look at it very, very differently, very objectively. And I also believe that it's important that the board have real teeth. So the bigger your company gets, if you raise money, you're going to have to deal with this too, especially Series A or B or C, you're going to give up board seats too. Before you're forced to give up a board seat to an investor, get into the practice of having a board. Set up a board, have advisors, have regular quarterly meetings, talk about the progress of the company, build that hygiene of accountability, and with respect to your particular situation, if one of you has to step down, there's a day very soon that I will no longer be the CEO of this company because it will outgrow me. And we're going to approach that as a board. We're going to do an external search, and they're going to replace me. And that's what happens, right? That's actually a good thing. That's a healthy thing, right? So I try to remove I'm not always successful, but I try to remove my personal feelings and my DNA and really step out of it and just sort of look independently. What's best for this company? I think that's a healthy way of considering that.
So instead of going to get another co-founder, you're saying is to create a board?
I would start with a board, and then I would have the conversation at a board level. It may be that it's a co-founder. Maybe you're better off for your relationship if you sold the company. I don't know. But I'm saying that instead of it's just the two of you, which is what it was like for me and my wife, you now have 7 people, and we're all thinking about this company and what's best for the company. It's a different set of solutions that emerge than what my ego would allow for, right?
Thank you.
Sure. Yes?
Just kind of I don't know how well you know the Boise, well, you probably know the Boise ecosystem much better than I do, but as far as just in Boise, where do you find a co-founder? Like it seems like there's a lot of cool searches online and stuff, but if you want to be co-located, then...
Where do you find love?
Yeah.
Right? Trailhead. No, I'm kidding. But I'm not totally kidding. Look, the people that are intellectually curious about the same sort of things that you are, they're one step away from you. They're going to some of the same meetups you are. They're probably congregating in some of the same coffee shops or alumni associations or events like this. That co-founder potentially is in this room. There's self-selection that goes on. Because, like I said, what we do is irrational. Why would someone do what we do? It's actually on paper not very smart. But you don't pick that. It picks you, right? And that person also is being called by something like this. A great place that I would look for is other startups. There are startups right now that are probably going to implode. They're going to probably shut down. There may be employees at other startups that have spent 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Their equity is worthless. Things didn't work out, but they're itching to do it themselves, maybe in a different role. You're the chief storyteller. You got to be up here telling your story. You need to go and see, like there are these companies like Count as an example, or Cradlepoint or whatever. I'm just picking some names that I know here locally. At noon, those employees come downstairs and they go and eat somewhere. Where are they eating? That's where I'm going to be hanging out, right? They're out there. And your co-founder could be in a different city, by the way. So this could be an online or virtual community that you connect with them in. Introductions from people. You know of someone else who's trying to do something, there was some conflict, something didn't pan out. What are you looking for? A technical co-founder or a business co-founder? That will also influence where you're going. But tell your story. This is about attraction and not promotion, right? So you're just going to be telling your story over and over and over again. And someone's going to say, hell yeah, I want that superhero costume. I see it, and that's what I want to. Yes.
I have a question. So let's say you have someone in mind, but you're not sure if now or in the future they might be a great fit to be that co-founder. Not even sure if they might be. What are some things that I can ask or look into to be proactive about making sure now that that person in like a month, a year, or whatever could be that co-founder that I would really want for that business? Because like you said, you know, they might even want to be involved a little bit financially, but not so much. Like, it just depends. But what are some other things other than the obvious of like me asking and really trying to see if that person really wants to be that co-founder?
So what's the problem with just asking that direct question? What?
No, nothing else. I'm just trying to see if there's any other
signals?
Yeah.
There are. This is like Jedi level stuff, but yeah, there are. Ask them to describe failure to you. Have them talk about their biggest failures. And see what kind of language they use. If it sounds like something that needed a Band-Aid, they're not a co-founder.
Okay.
If it sounds like something that needed an amputation, probably co-founder material. I think failure is a greater signal for co-founder mindset and capacity than anything else. Because failure sets you up, not for everyone, but for the people who become founders and co-founders, sets you up for resilience. And that is the characteristic that I think is most called upon for doing this crazy thing that we do.
A follow-up question. If someone goes, well, you know, I like this idea, it sounds great, and I want to help you like when I can or where I can, that's not a co-founder.
You know what that's called?
What?
It's called a freelancer.
Yeah.
That's not a co-founder.
Okay.
When you're ready, you say, here, design this logo for me. That's great. Here's $100 or whatever, right? Those relationships are important. You'll know it's a co-founder because they're texting you at 2 in the morning, and they're just like, you know that thing that you said about how modern software licensing is extractive, and that Zoom and Slack and Salesforce and all these tools, all they do is they want us to use more and more and more of it. And there's nothing about Zoom that will say, hey, you've had 6 one-hour-long Zoom meetings, turn the computer off, go for a walk. I can't stop thinking about that, and I want to build an alternative to that. When I think of something, it's like a mole. It will not leave me. I am obsessing over this. Does anyone else have this problem? How would you fix this? How bad is it? You're thinking about it and you're living in it, and it chooses you. You'll find that same energy. Or, that's nice, you can be a paid intern at my startup, or that's a different relationship. Both are good, one is existential. You, sir, in the back.
So I look at that form that you pulled up, and it reminds me a lot of my risk management days. If this, then that, right? And so as I think about that, and then I insert the greatest wow factor, the human being, as the other side who's filling this out, what are the odds that you're going to go through that form and you're not going to be so divergent? In a way, I look at that form, I go, that's my way out of saying yes to co-founder. But I don't think that's your intent, so it's hard to do that.
I really love the question, TM, thank you. And that was a softball for me. I really appreciate that question. Thank you. And sorry the other day when you honked at me and you went, I'm from New York. When someone honks at me, I don't turn around and say, hey, I'm like, what the fuck? So sorry about that. Thank you for that question. This methodology is not about, okay, let me start with this. There's a mindset, have you ever had a salesperson, like you walk into a store and someone, the second you walk in, is like, hi, how you doing? Right? What they are doing is they are qualifying you in. If you've ever driven into a dealership parking lot, you know what I'm talking about. You have a pulse, you have a car, you're a customer.
And you're worth $350.
Right. The opposite is to qualify out. You walk up and you say, I'm interested. You go to a Ferrari dealership. There's a 3-year wait to get a Ferrari. You have to jump through, I don't know a Ferrari, but you have to go through a ton of hoops just to ensure, because they've got scarce few Ferraris to give you, they want to ensure that you're qualified. This process is not about qualifying them in or out. It's about assessing how you two will work through those gaps. If everything is, you're scoring it exactly the same and you have the same ideas, that's a little scary to me, right? I would be very concerned. I think the likelihood of that happening is not zero, but probably low. Again, it's less the score, it's how do we resolve this? Well, because it was my idea, I make all of these decisions. Okay, that's one. So you want to know this about this person before you start something, right? Oh, I'm the engineer. I make all the decisions on this. Why? I'm out there talking to potential customers. I'm hearing what they want. Why is that not important? How do we make major product decisions? How do we work through pivots? How do we work through a difference of opinion for the roadmap or for when to raise money? It's less about the actual, what was my answer, what was your answer, but how do we come to something that would potentially work for us? And if you're finding that there's a big delta, we just can't come to resolution, you want to know that sooner, I would argue, rather than later. It's just a tool.
So how do you put them to the test?
How do you put who to the test? The co-founder?
Her perspective, his. Create a delta test.
Create a delta for you? I would, if I understand your question correctly, I think that you're basically saying, take a look at this, fill it out the best that you can. I'm going to fill mine out, and then we're going to sit together and we're going to see how far off we are, and then how do we reconcile that? And how do we get through this experience? Do we still want to work together after this 2 hours of doing this thing together? Or have we learned something about one another that is pulling forward major incompatibilities? Pull that forward.
I'll bring a black and red checkerboard and play checkers with you to bring you to the delta point.
Okay, I don't understand what that means, but I would love to play checkers with you.
Because I've done exactly what you said, put you in a stressful situation and see how you deal with it.
I see.
Isn't that what you're getting at? Or what she wants to know? What TM is asking?
Yeah, we're trying to simulate stressful situations, very real situations.
Do I want to spend 2 hours to fill out your form to get to that point with 12 perspective deltas?
I don't know. That's not I don't know. That's up to you. It's also up to you to determine like what's the biggest risk for you in your own startup formation. Is it picking the right co-founder? Is it speed? Some cases, famously, Drew Houston, co-founder of Dropbox, had submitted to Y Combinator, got rejected, had gone back to MIT, and the Y Combinator folks, Paul Graham, reached out to him and said, hey, you should try again. But you really need a co-founder. He goes to the rec center at MIT and sees some kid like, sitting at another table. It turned out to be Arash, and he said, hey, I'm submitting my application. Do you want to be my co-founder? Sure, okay, what do you want to work on? And it turned out to be a fantastic partnership. So they didn't do any of this, right? So again, let's be very clear. I'm not suggesting this is the only way of doing it. But for me, I think the idea of being able to pull risk forward and address it, I think is a sober way of doing it. Everyone, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for the questions. And I think now there's networking.
And free drinks.
And free drinks. And go see Dom. He's got tickets for you. Thank you.